Hi, welcome to the channel. This is the first of what I think is going to be quite a long line of videos connected with one project that I want to kick off today, which is to fit a Salisbury rear axle to my 1980 Lightweight Land Rover that you can see behind me. The reason I want to fit the Salisbury axle, which in America is much better known as a Dana 60 design, is because the standard Rover axle fitted to a lightweight is a 10-spline half shaft unit, and those are prone to snapping off-road, and if you're putting more power through the axle than it was really designed for, and that's what I am doing because I fitted a Rover V8 engine to the lightweight a few years back, and on one occasion when I was off-roading I snapped a half shaft, and I thought, well, I should start thinking about how to avoid that, and I figured that the most cost-effective way of doing that is to fit a Salisbury axle, or at least to attempt to fit one. It might not work, who knows. Salisburys aren't usually fitted to short wheelbase. Rover never did it, although why would they? Because it was unnecessary, but also because this Salisbury differential is physically a little bit larger than the Rover one, you have to fit a shorter prop shaft, and it's possible that this causes vibration problems. This is one of the things I've heard, that the vibration makes it a little bit impractical, but I'd like to think I can get around that, so as you'll see in the later videos. So let's kick off that project. So the first thing is to actually buy the Salisbury axle, and you can see this is a photo I took when I brought the axle back. I bought this from a guy who bizarrely lives only a couple of miles from Salisbury. The 4.7 ratio differential is fine for me because I'm using the Ashcroft modified gears in the transfer box, so effectively when I'm running down the road I've got the equivalent of a 3.54 anyway, so using an actual 4.7 diff is fine for me. So I bought this axle, it was a good price, and the guy also had the Bailey Morris Extreme prop shaft that he could sell me reasonably cheaply as well, so that was a good combination. So this is what we're looking at with regard to the suspect Land Rover and the new axle and refurbished rear springs that we're going to be installing at the same time. The reason that I'm actually doing this entire project is because some years ago I beefed up the engine in this Landy. I'll just show you that. And there we go. So this lightweight was originally built as a 24 volt fitted for radio, FFR lightweight, and when I decided to put a Rover V8 in, I'm sure you'll have recognised that, I also thought I would try and convert it to 24 volt, or well, I should say retain 24 volt, and consequently that's why you see that absolutely massive alternator on a special bracket. This entire installation, engine and electrics, came from a 101 forward control, and somewhat to my surprise it actually slotted straight in. Well, it slotted as straight in as any Rover V8 does into a Series 3. Needed a bit of bulkhead cutting, but apart from that, nice installation, works well. So carrying on around the Land Rover, you can see the work I've already done. This is the original Rover axle, but you can see that although it's still roughly in the right place, everything has been detached. So that's pretty much ready to just remove. As we move round, you can see the Parabolic Springs, which look very shiny and new, but they're actually not, but I've refurbished them and installed polybush orange bushes as well. And in fact that was the reason that I started doing this project in the first place, just to get the parabolics back into perfect condition. And it was while I was working on that that I happened to be looking through eBay and spotted an advertisement for this. This is a Salisbury axle. In actual fact this is a Dana 60 axle made by the Spicer Group, or at least the design comes from the Spicer Group, used in utility 4x4s right the way around the world, and I'll give you a bit more idea on the history of these in a separate part of the video. I have done a little bit of work on this already. When I got it, it had, in theory, been already converted to fit into a short wheelbase Land Rover. However, the brackets that had been welded on for the spring mounts were not up to a great engineering standard at all, borderline dangerous. So I've cut those off already, and you can see where that's happened, and it's the same on the other side. This is original. This is where the bump stops contact. This is original, as you can tell by the rust, and this is where on the long wheelbase the leaf springs mount. But for a short wheelbase installation you have to have one of these here, and so this is where the not perfect fabrication had been put on, so I've cut that off. So you're not missing much seeing that, because that's just a fair amount of using a cutting disc and then a grinding disc to clean everything up. At the same time, I didn't want to miss the opportunity to check all of the hubs and seals. In theory they'd been changed only 1,000 miles before the axle was sold to me, but in practice that wasn't great, and in fact I'm glad I stripped everything down, because I discovered that one of the brake unions for the cylinder on this side was only held in by a couple of threads, and they were off center. The whole thing could have popped out any second. So I bought new cylinders, and due to a slight oil leak I've bought new shoes as well. All of these bits and bobs are in these lovely supply boxes here. I'll run through all of those parts with you later on. You can also see, by the way, while I'm taking this shot, the two half shafts, significantly beefier than the items you find in standard Rover axles. Moving back, both of the hubs look like this. I've ordered new retaining nuts because these have been somewhat damaged in the past by people who've used cold chisels to undo them and then retension them. But apart from that, in theory they work, but they only cost a few pence, so I've bought new. I've also changed the distance piece. It's called a distance piece, but in practice this is just the surface that the rear oil seal runs on. Surprisingly common to find that people don't change that when they change the hub oil seal, and that seems like not such a great idea, because these only cost a few pence. They're not particularly difficult to change. It's an interference fit. You just cold chisel them off, and then you just tap on new ones carefully with a punch, and away you go. You know that when you install your hub with new oil seals, that you're going to get a nice solid seal there with a nice new surface. As we move along to the other side, you can see this is absolutely identical. Everything's stripped down. I've changed the distance piece. As far as the differential is concerned, I have had the rear cover off, and I will be doing again, and I'll film that for you. I've only put it back on now temporarily because I just don't want any drips of oil coming out while I'm manoeuvring the thing around on the floor. And additionally, if you look carefully there, you'll see normally there's a little bracket that runs between here, and it creates a mounting point for the brake pipe T-piece. Unfortunately, evidently, it also provides a collecting place for water and mud, and that's caused the entire pan to rust away here. So I've bought a new pan, and that'll get fitted with the final fitment.